Welcome to your personalized deep dive.
All right.
Today we're getting you prepped for a wilderness scenario.
Okay.
Finding water when you need it most.
Smart thinking.
You've asked for the full rundown on how to locate and collect water in a survival situation.
Very important.
We've got survival guides,
Okay.
articles by wilderness experts,
Good.
even some blog posts by seasoned adventurers
Nice.
to give you the best possible intel.
Sounds like we're ready
I think so.
to dive in.
What's the first thing our listeners should know about surviving without water?
Well, everyone's heard of the rule of threes, right?
Yeah.
3 days without water,
And you're in trouble.
and you're in trouble. But
Right.
our sources point out it's not quite that simple.
There are other factors.
So many factors can
Like-
affect how long you can actually go.
Like what?
Things like temperature,
Oh, yeah.
humidity, how much you're exerting yourself.
Your overall
Yeah.
health fitness level. Yeah.
The takeaway here is
Okay.
finding water needs to be your top priority
Number one.
in a survival situation.
One guide really drove that point home.
Right.
Describing all the ways our bodies depend on water.
Right.
Regulating temperature, digestion, even clear thinking.
It all goes out the window.
It all goes out the window without enough H2O.
It's easy to underestimate how much water we lose just through daily activity.
Right.
That's why conserving water is as important as finding it.
The guides offered some surprisingly simple tips
Oh.
for doing just that.
Okay.
Limiting eating,
Makes sense.
especially fatty foods,
I see.
since digestion uses up water.
And apparently, even minimizing talking
Oh, wow.
and breathing through your nose
Really?
can help reduce water loss.
It sounds a little extreme,
It does.
but every bit counts in a survival situation.
Absolutely.
So we've established that finding water is priority number one.
All right.
Let's talk about where to start.
The obvious places are the ones we'd all think of.
The easy ones?
Streams, rivers, lakes.
Okay.
And ideally, you want fast-flowing water,
Okay.
especially further upstream.
To reduce the risk of bacteria.
Right.
But even if a river looks pristine, one article cautioned against assuming it's safe to drink.
Oh, interesting.
There could be contaminants from sources further upriver.
You never know what's happening upstream, especially in areas with human activity or industry.
Good point.
So no matter how clear that water looks,
Purification is a must.
is an absolute must.
We'll get into the specifics later on.
Sure.
Now let's move on to some less obvious water sources.
Okay.
Things you might not think of right away.
Okay.
Rainwater collection.
Right.
Seems like a pretty straightforward option.
Especially
If you can maximize your collection area.
one article showed photos of people using tarps or ponchos to catch rainwater.
To catch rainwater.
Yeah.
That's clever.
It's amazing how resourceful people can be.
Here's one that I found really intriguing.
Okay.
Collecting morning dew.
Oh, yeah.
By tying absorbent cloth around your ankles
Oh, I've heard of that.
and walking through grass.
That's a classic survival technique.
Right.
It utilizes the natural condensation
Yeah.
that forms on plants overnight.
It wouldn't yield a ton of water.
But every drop counts, right?
Every drop counts.
Especially in a survival situation.
Yeah.
Every drop is precious.
Speaking of resourcefulness,
Yes.
have you ever heard of using transpiration bags?
I have.
It's almost like you're tapping into the plants
Exactly.
to get water.
You're capturing the water vapor plants release through their leaves.
You tie a plastic bag around a leafy branch,
Yeah.
preferably in a sunny location,
Yeah.
and let the moisture collect.
And the best part,
What's that?
the water collected through transpiration
Yeah,
is usually clean enough to drink.
without further purification.
Huge advantage.
Huge advantage.
In a survival situation.
Where you might not have the means
Yeah.
to boil or filter your water.
Another technique that relies on natural processes
Okay.
is building a solar still.
Solar stills are pretty ingenious.
They are?
They use the sun
Right.
to evaporate and collect water.
Even from seemingly dry sources.
There are two types, right?
Yeah.
Above ground
Yeah.
and underground.
Yeah.
And the underground ones are generally more effective.
Because they tap into the moisture in the soil.
Right.
One article laid out step-by-step instructions
Oh, really?
for building an underground still.
Oh, cool.
It involves digging a pit,
Okay.
putting a container in the center,
Yeah.
covering it with plastic,
Yeah.
and weighing down the edges with rocks.
Clever.
They even suggested adding a drinking tube.
Oh, wow.
It shows how these techniques
Yeah.
can be adapted to fit your situation and whatever you've got on hand.
Now, what about digging for water?
Okay.
When would that be the best approach?
That seems most useful.
Yeah.
When you suspect there might be water just below the surface.
The guides recommended looking for areas with damp ground, green vegetation, dry riverbeds, or even the base of cliffs.
They recommended digging a small test hole first.
To check for moisture.
If you hit mud, you're in business.
And keep digging.
Yep.
Until water starts pooling at the bottom.
And to make sure your little well doesn't collapse.
Oh, yeah.
One guide suggested lining the sides with rocks.
So far, we've covered a good mix of water finding techniques.
I think so.
From the obvious to the more unexpected.
And we're just getting started.
Oh, there's more.
There are even more techniques out there specifically for different environments.
Up next, we're tackling water in some extreme climates.
Oh, okay.
Think snowy mountains.
Right.
Scorching deserts.
Yeah.
Even deserted beaches.
Sounds good.
Get ready to learn how to find water.
Okay.
In some of the most challenging landscapes on Earth.
I'm ready.
All right, let's crank up the challenge level.
Okay.
We're talking about finding water.
Yeah.
In some of the most extreme environments out there.
Extreme.
Snowy mountains.
Right.
Scorching deserts. Even those picture-perfect deserted beaches.
These environments throw in some extra curveballs.
For sure.
But as always, there are ways to find water if you know what to look for.
Okay.
Let's start with those snowy or icy landscapes.
All right.
What stood out to you from the research?
One thing that surprised me
Yeah.
was the advice against eating snow directly.
Oh, really?
It seems so counterintuitive.
It does seem strange.
Yeah.
But consuming snow can actually lower your core body temperature.
Putting you at risk.
Yeah.
Hypothermia.
And since it takes a lot of energy to melt snow internally,
oh, wow,
it can actually dehydrate you.
So melting it down is the way to go.
Right.
Though one article mentioned a cool trick.
What's that?
For identifying old sea ice,
Okay.
which has a lower salt content.
That's a great tip for anyone in a polar region.
Yeah.
Old sea ice is usually bluer in color.
Okay.
And has smoother edges.
These survival guides are packed with so much useful information.
So much good stuff.
It's amazing.
It really shows how humans have adapted to thrive in even the most extreme conditions.
Speaking of extreme, let's shift gears to the scorching desert.
Okay.
What techniques caught your eye for finding water in such an arid environment? The idea of digging wells in strategic spots really stood out.
If you understand the subtle signs, there's often water just below the surface.
The guides recommended looking for areas with damp ground, green vegetation, even behind dunes in dry lake beds.
Those are all good indicators.
Okay.
And another method that seemed surprisingly simple was collecting condensation from metal surfaces.
Like if you had a metal container, you could leave it out overnight to collect dew.
Exactly.
So simple.
It highlights how being observant and resourceful
can make all the difference in a survival situation.
It really can.
Even things we usually take for granted, like condensation,
can be valuable sources of water. Okay, last but not least, we've got the beach.
The beach.
You'd think with all that ocean water around, finding something drinkable wouldn't be a problem.
Unfortunately, salt water is the opposite of helpful.
Yeah.
When it comes to staying hydrated.
Drinking it can dehydrate you further.
Exactly.
That's why it's vital to know how to find fresh water in a beach environment.
And luckily, the guides provided some clever techniques.
I'm glad.
One method involves digging a well behind the first sand dune.
Behind the first sand dune.
The idea is to reach the fresh water that's often trapped beneath the surface, filtered by the sand.
Makes sense.
And they also mentioned a slightly more involved technique.
What's that?
That uses heated rocks to create steam.
To create steam?
Which you then collect.
Wow.
It sounds like a bit more work.
Yeah, but in a survival situation, it could be a lifesaver.
It could.
We've talked about adapting to different environments.
Right.
But there's another important source of water we need to discuss.
And what's that?
Plants.
Yeah.
But that's where plant knowledge becomes absolutely crucial.
For sure.
You need to be able to identify which plants are safe for hydration and which ones are poisonous.
One article highlighted one particularly dangerous example.
Oh, no.
The Manchineel apple found in Panama.
Yeah.
It's so toxic.
So toxic.
That even standing under the tree can be dangerous.
Yikes. That definitely underscores the need for careful observation and informed decision-making.
Informed decision-making, for sure.
But of course, there are plenty of plants that can provide safe and valuable hydration.
One article reminded us about the leaf transpiration technique we discussed earlier, which can be especially effective in areas with dense vegetation.
And then there are fruits, cacti, and other plants that can offer hydration.
But as always,
yes,
caution is key.
It's important to know what you're dealing with before you start consuming anything.
Speaking of plant-based water sources, we can't forget about the classic desert island staple.
What's that?
Coconuts.
Coconuts.
Coconuts are a survival superstar for a reason.
I agree.
They provide both food and water.
Very useful.
One source pointed out that green or immature coconuts are the best for hydration.
Because they have the highest water content.
Right.
And while mature coconuts still offer hydration, they're higher in minerals and fat.
Yeah.
So moderation is key.
That ties back to what we talked about earlier about limiting fatty foods to conserve water.
It all connects.
Okay, so we've explored a whole range of techniques.
A whole range.
For finding water.
From collecting dew to digging wells to tapping into plants.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But there's one critical step we can't skip.
What's that?
Purification.
Purification.
Let's talk about how to make sure the water we find is safe to drink.
That's where the real magic happens.
Turning even the murkiest puddle into a refreshing, life-sustaining drink.
Yeah.
All right, we found water. But as we know, not all water is created equal.
Right.
Before we take a sip, let's talk purification.
Absolutely. Even the clearest water can harbor microscopic dangers. That could make you sick.
So let's break down the ways to make sure our hard-earned water is safe to drink.
Okay.
First up, the classic boiling method.
Yeah.
Seems pretty straightforward.
It is. Yeah. Boiling is the most reliable method for most situations.
The general rule is a rolling boil for at least 1 minute.
At least 1 minute.
But remember, at higher altitudes,
yeah,
water boils at a lower temperature.
That's right.
So you'll need to boil it longer.
To be safe.
To make sure those nasty microbes are gone.
Exactly.
Good point. And I know boiling doesn't remove chemical pollutants, but it's still the best way to get rid of bacteria and viruses.
In most cases, yes.
In a wilderness setting, what about filtration?
Filtration.
Is that as simple as straining water through your shirt, like they do in the movies?
It can be.
Really?
Using cloth clothing or even a coffee filter.
A coffee filter?
Yeah.
Wow.
Can work surprisingly well to remove sediment and larger particles.
So it makes the water clearer and easier to drink?
But doesn't necessarily make it safe.
Right.
Filtration alone won't get rid of those microscopic bugs.
The ones that can make you sick.
Exactly. You need to combine it with another method.
Like what?
Like chemical disinfection.
Ah, yes. Purification tablets.
Purification tablets.
Those seem pretty easy to use.
They are.
As long as you follow the instructions carefully.
Of course.
Dosage and contact time.
Dosage and contact time.
Are key for those tablets or iodine drops.
Right.
To work their magic.
What about natural purification methods?
Oh, yeah.
The guides mention a few options using natural materials.
Layering charcoal, sand, and gravel.
Can create a surprisingly effective filter.
Really?
And certain plant materials.
Like what?
Like prickly pear pads.
Prickly pear pads.
Can also help purify water.
It's amazing how resourceful people have become.
I know, it's incredible.
Using what nature provides.
So we've found water.
We've purified it.
What's the last step?
Storage.
Storage.
You don't want to lose your precious water after all that work.
Oh, of course not.
The guides recommended using water bottles, hydration packs, or even natural containers.
Oh, yeah.
Like hollowed out logs or bamboo stalks.
Make sure those natural containers are thoroughly cleaned before you use them.
And it's important to store your water in a cool, shaded area.
Right.
Away from any potential contaminants.
Absolutely. You want to keep that water as fresh and safe as possible.
Wow, we've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
From the urgency of finding water to all the ingenious ways to collect and purify it.
All kinds of techniques.
I feel like I could survive anywhere now.
You're well on your way.
What was your biggest takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway is that water is often closer than you think. With the right knowledge and a bit of ingenuity, you can find it, purify it, and thrive.
Out of all the methods we discussed, which one surprised you the most?
That's a good question.
Was it collecting dew with cloth tied to your ankles?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Or maybe tapping into trees for water?
There are so many incredible techniques out there.
It really shows how creative humans can be.
Yeah, it's really inspiring.
When it comes to finding this essential resource.
It is.
This deep dive has been eye-opening.
It has.
But the learning doesn't stop here.
That's right.
I encourage you to keep exploring.
Keep learning.
Maybe try out some of these techniques during a hike or a camping trip.
Yeah, when the stakes aren't so high.
Practice makes perfect. And who knows? You might even stumble upon a new water-finding method.
It's possible.
We haven't even discussed yet.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of water in the wilderness.
It's been fun.
Stay curious.
Stay prepared.
And most importantly,
stay hydrated.
We'll see you on our next adventure.